Hello, I'm Anthony Draher, author of Pearls of Juggling, and today we want to talk about juggling and movement. Why, how, and in Pearls of Juggling, there's two chapters, actually, two chunky chapters on movement and juggling. But anyway, today we're going to talk about why juggling and movement. Why are we talking about juggling and movement? So we can become fancy jugglers, or so we can fill the stage, or you know what happens lots of times, we've been juggling for a couple of years maybe, and we start to think, well, it could be interesting, combining my body. Perhaps my body is actually another prop with the balls or the clubs, and a club is a bit like an arm, and how do they all fit together? And so we might sort of like ask these sort of questions. But I'm going to come back to a much more essential way of seeing things today. Movement is even just with the hands, with the arms, with our legs, moving weight. Essentially, movement, physical movement, is shifting weight from one leg to another. So what I'm trying to say here in this video is we don't necessarily need to go to dance lessons to learn how to move and juggle, though it might help. But you don't have to do the hard way like I did, which was do years and years of jazz dance that you don't know how it's going, you can't follow a choreography. If you're learning to move when you're older, then there's no need to do these difficult dance methods. There are simpler methods to do it. Anyway, so my favorite reason to learn to juggle and move is because it's more fun. When the body is more engaged, it just makes us more alive. And if we're performing on a stage, it makes our characters, our performance come more alive when we're more in our bodies. So we can move, and actually the more we are in our bodies, the less we actually need to move to have this presence. But we need a bodily presence. Otherwise, we're just in our heads. Lots of us jugglers, we're really in our heads, and we need to be in our bodies to enjoy it more, right? So juggling and movement, it challenges our juggling and it makes our technique stronger. And there are even really simple things that I always suggest people when they learn a trick, especially at the beginning, but even 5 balls, let's say, is to try and do turning around yourself. And like you get all these funny throws that you have to learn how to catch them, and it's all more data, so that when you have a stray throw, wherever it is on stage or in your practice, you catch them. So turning is perhaps one of the simplest ways of moving. And of course, there are even simpler ways. There are just like squatting down a bit and standing up a little bit. But walking then is like the next step to juggling and movement. What could you do while walking, even juggling? Here, juggling and movement, we're talking a little bit more fancy things maybe. But let's get to it little bit by bit. And then we have running and juggling, of course, or jogging, and skipping. Other people throwing the ropes, obviously, because how can you skip and juggle at the same time? Might be possible, I don't know. But so okay, let's put this to one side now. Whoop! Dancing and juggling. This is what we really mean by movement and juggling. So we've already said we don't need to do dance lessons. But sort of like contact improvisation lessons, they fill our minds and our bodies with lots of data about how to move in a more aware way. We're looking for awareness, bodily awareness is what we're looking for dance, because you can do absolutely anything with your body. You can do, dance could be anything you like. It's just the more we're aware of what we're doing, the more beautiful it is, and the more we take time for pauses and for movements and changing the movements. And there's a section in Pearls of Juggling all about Laban, about codifying dance movements. What are they? Incredible. It's a incredible journey you can go on going into Laban. So what do I do? How can we? Let's start with our props, right? So if we throw our props a little bit out of our catch, we have to move to catch them. If we throw them over our shoulder, we have to move to catch them. So this could be one of the first sort of games that we're playing with ourselves, throwing our props a little bit further away and going to catch them, putting ourselves off balance. Don't be always in balance. In balance, boring visually, right? We need this imbalance going on. And so then we can also say like, okay, so if I move, how do I need to throw to accommodate that movement? Then it gets a little bit more brainy, right? But that's also possible. But more important than all this, there are three things that are more important than this. One is to feel the body moving where it is. Like that's the second one. Know where the body is in space. And the third one, I'll tell you later. So yeah, it's moving from your center, moving through your center. So if you look at dogs and animals, they have this center, right? And they move from their center. And lots of jugglers, you can see even really, really good jugglers, they all become very stiff in the shoulders, and they become very stiff, and they move a little bit like, you know, a little bit less elegant than they could do on stage, a little bit less fluid, perhaps, which means that their presence doesn't fully come out. I know that emphasis is on our juggling, right? But you know, we're not invisible, and the audience looks to us, looks to the juggler. Otherwise, after a while, they all get bored of the juggling, right? So oftentimes, as jugglers, I know this myself, we think, tip tap, that would be a really cool thing to add to my juggling. So what we're doing there is adding a whole other technique to juggling. It just becomes too much. It can be very nice, but oftentimes it's too much. So here we're thinking more of juggling and movement more not as technique, more as expression. And this is where it transforms the whole thing, because juggling wants to express itself, and it wants us to express it through it. We could argue about these concepts, but in the end, we want to have fun with our juggling, and we want to live it. We want to be in the flow. We want to be in the presence, and we want to it wants to feel exciting, right? And have these surprise catches from nowhere, and open up a whole vision, and just be really in the moment. That's what we're looking for with our juggling, is to be focused and in the flow, and the brain is really connected to the body. So this is one of my absolute favorite images inside Pearls of Juggling. And this juggler, you know, there's images here of the 5 elements. There's the earth, there's the water, there's the fire, there's the air, and then there's sort of like the ether, the space. The space one is a little bit hidden. It's here. There it is. The space one is right there. So with the elements, we can start to play with these, you know, even just if we just play with water and fire and air for now, that's enough. Earth is a bit hard because it's hard to throw. We can think of it as being very thick, sort of like mud. And that's a different kind of way of moving than water, right? And wind blows us around all over the place. And space is a little bit like a non-juggling. You know, you're sort of like not juggling at all anymore. You're just really in your presence. That's how I think of it as the elements. And we can be inspired by all sorts of things to move. We can think, how does a dog move when he juggles? And I can do it like this. Or how does a giraffe move and juggle? And I can have that in my body as well. We can pretend that we're, how does a great ballerina juggle? And we can try that. Or whatever you like, you know, whatever inspires you, you could do. And the retreats that I've run for like nearly 30 years now, it's absolutely crazy. We do a lot of juggling and movement stuff, and it gets us out of our heads. You know, we don't want to be in our heads so much when we're juggling. We want to be much more spontaneous. Obviously know what we're doing, have a structure, but we want to enjoy it much more, right? And lots of us have come into juggling because we love sciences, perhaps, or mathematics. And when we come from that, we're often very heady. So we have it. It's a bit more difficult for us to get into this sort of like movement and expression side of things. I studied chemistry at university, and I've had to learn all of this throughout the years. And it's been a beautiful process coming back to my body. And but if you're like at a plateau now with your juggling and you want to make it better and better, I would really wholeheartedly suggest to start working a little bit more on body and juggling. Don't worry about what it looks like to start with. It will look really odd, but don't worry about that. It's the process that we're often much more interested in than what it looks like. And then you can go and choose whatever you like that's come out of it and use it in your performances. But lots of people aren't so interested in the performance side of things. We juggle because we like how it feels. It likes how makes us feel. And so if we're interested in a little bit more confidence in our life, a little bit more openness, then the invitation is to move with juggling, because then we will start to express ourselves more. I'm moving on now a little bit from teaching retreats. I have a retreat coming up at the end of March this year. We're 2026. It's 4 nights, 5 days in Tuscany, and they're great experiences. We do a lot of Tai Chi, which I find is fantastic for learning how to juggle and move and bring us into our presence. We do yoga to loosen lots of tension. There's community, and there's a focused training session that we always have, and the afternoons are dedicated to exploration and expression. And everybody just comes up with the most incredible sequences and tricks that haven't worked for years or ever. Perhaps they start to work again. So yeah, if you're thinking of diving into juggling, I would definitely I don't want to say come to my retreat, right? Because then it's all like, what's the point of this whole video? Explore your juggling and movement, and yeah, see a convention even. But if you want to dive in really deep, then join me. I hope this has been useful to you, and love to hear your comments. And please subscribe, of course, to my channel, Pearls of Juggling, and catch you next time.